Sassa has irregularly paid more than 150 million rand to deceased social grant beneficiaries over the past 3 years. Social Development Minister Lindiwe Zulu confirmed that about 74,636 such irregular payments had been made. For more on this conversation, we're now joined by Paseka, who speaks for the South African Social Security Agency. Dr. Letsatsi, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. What would you say as an agency are the main challenges that Sassa faces which prohibit the agency from fully ensuring that incorrect payments don't occur?
Thanks for having me. I think we just basically want to put it in context. The figures which you just gave out now are indeed correct, but it will be important for us to explain how we are able, or how the money ended up in the account of the deceased. One, I may just mention here that we submit the payment file from Sassa to the banks on the cut-off date is the 22nd. So anybody who would die between the 27th and the 3rd when the payment is made, it means we would not be able to invest the money because it's automatically in the account of the individuals. But secondly, sometimes when one of the family member dies, you would find that it takes 2 or 3 days for the family to report that there's a deceased person. So those are some of the issues which delay, and we find that the money which we basically process is already in the account of a deceased person. However, I must make mention of the fact that we are obliged by law to make sure that we recoup that money. But one of the things which we want to put out there is that it sometimes doesn't make any economic sense. If a child dies who is getting 510 rands per month, for us to do tracking and tracing, would spend 3,000 rand to trace or to recoup 510. It doesn't make any economic sense.
Speaking of the numbers, I mean, you say the number 74,636 is incorrect, and this is a number that was given over the years, over the last 3 years, in terms of these incorrect or like you're explaining, payments that are made before a person dies. The number of deceased beneficiaries who have received grants have decreased in half since 2021 to the current 2023-2024 financial year. Are you expecting a decrease or a trend in that decrease in the next financial year?
It's a very difficult question which you are asking me, but I'll attempt to respond to it. What I said that the numbers which you gave are correct. I must just say that they are not incorrect at all. But we find ourselves in a very difficult situation. One, it depends if a person dies, when is the death going to be reported at Home Affairs? Because there are, for example, people who die in far-flung areas where a death is not reported. I can assure you now that if that happens, it simply means we will pay that person forever until we ask them to come to do the verification processes. That is where we find out the person is deceased. However, if you don't report the death, it's very complicated and difficult. But secondly, what is difficult is that we don't necessarily submit the payment file on the day when the payment is made to the banks. There's a process, administrative process, which happens between the 22nd and monthly, hence we make the payment on the 3rd. So we may have to do something very drastic, but obviously to allow the administrative process to take place. You would find that once the file has been submitted, the person has died, the money is in the account of the person, and it will be difficult for us to reverse the money which has been deposited. The only thing that we want to appeal to the communities is that please try as possible when there's a death in a family to report it immediately with Home Affairs, so that when we bounce the information with a database of Home Affairs, we are able to access the information that the person is deceased. But I think that's for me, and you know that when there's a death in a family, yes, as much as we would want to report the death, but the family is traumatized, is still trying to come to terms with the fact that they've lost their loved ones. So there are processes, and there may be a delay of a day or two before the people go to Home Affairs and report the death in the family.
So ultimately what you're saying, that is that there really can't be any steps that Sassa can take in order to rectify this process. I mean, you do say that to chase after 500 rands that has been paid for a child that's deceased could be a futile exercise, but cumulatively, this is 150 million rands that the agency has reported in having lost out on in these number of years.
You're quite right. In actual fact, it's cash 22. You chase 510. It will sound juicy, you know, to the public out there. 150 million paid to people who are dead. But would have spent double the amount to chase 150,000. I wonder if what I'm saying makes sense. For us to be able to get the 510 rand, we'll spend 3,000 rand. So it doesn't make any economic sense in that regard to say instead of spending 150 million, which we will recoup, which sometimes we may not even be able to recoup because a person stay in the informal settlement, and we chase after a person who is indigent. We are chasing after vulnerable people who don't even have a cent. So we are actually being forced to chase shadows. But we agree that the law says we must recoup the money. If you don't recoup it, the AG will be on your case, Parliament will be on your case. If you chase it, Newzroom Afrika will ask these questions, and the community will look at Sassa and say, these ones are extremely insensitive. The person is dead. The person stays in an informal settlement. The person does not even have a bed to sleep on, but we are knocking at their door and saying they must pay the money, the 510 which they took because of a person is deceased. But we are obliged as an organization to do our work, and the work says the money which was withdrawn from the account of an individual must be recouped. We have to make sure that we do that because we account to Parliament. But all that we can simply say is that we must work very closely with the communities to make sure that when there's a deceased person, they at least Home Affairs is informed so that when we check this Home Affairs, we're able to understand that the person is deceased and we don't process the money in the account.
Right.
But I'm saying there is that gap where we submit the payment file on the 22nd, and if a person dies on the 2nd when we make the payment on the 3rd, the money is already in the account.
You make mention of the Auditor General. Now, the AG found that a total of 5,812 civil servants were drawing 350 Rand social grants, despite the fact that they were also drawing a salary from government. What hindrances in the system led to not detecting people with a personal number being able to get the 350 Rand grant?
I like that question which you just posed, because it will be very clear for us to explain to the public that it doesn't mean when you are a public servant, you can't apply for the grant. You can, including yourself, you can apply for the grant if it's a foster care grant. It is not means tested. So whether you are a public servant, whether you are a business person, or whether you are employed to get a salary, a foster care grant, it is not means tested. So it means if you apply for it, if you are given a child who is in your custody, you are able to access that particular amount of money. So it's not illegal. These people who have been getting this amount of money, what they've been doing is not illegal. But secondly, we have a situation where people have the kids who are at their care. Unfortunately, in the process, they get employed in the department, whatever, and all that we are telling them or we're saying to them that once your condition changes, don't sit down and assume that we would know that you've been employed. We are just appealing to people that please come forward, explain that my condition has changed, and since my condition has changed, please make sure that you remove me from your database because I am now any. We identify these particular cases. We followed it up, and especially if the public servant, it's very easy to be able to trace the person and take appropriate steps against such individuals.
All right, and that is us. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Thank you for those clarifications and for speaking with us tonight. That was Paseka, the spokesperson for the South African Social Grant Agency.